What's going on, guys? This is Gene Jensen, and this is a beginner's guide to hard body swim baits. Alright, so to start off with, as a disclaimer, most of the hard body swim baits that I have are bull shads. Mike Buca, the maker of the bull shad, has been a friend of mine since 2001, long before he started making swim baits. Therefore, I'm pretty loyal. And so you'll see most of my hard baits, most of my jointed hard baits are bull shads. We'll talk about other ones and stuff like that, but you can basically say that this video is sponsored by bull shad because I got a ton of them. But anyway, let's dive into just the beginners, the basics, the things that what I want to talk about is like the tackle that you guys can use, or you may already have that you can use to fish these things. When I first started even thinking about fishing hard body swim baits, the only thing that came to mind was this. And this scared the crap out of me. A big giant 14 to 18 ounce hard bodied swim bait, and which actually meant that I was going to need to have a special rod and a special reel, and I didn't want to do that, so I just never picked them up. Well, cool thing is there's baits out there now where the rods that you already have, you can fish these baits and they catch fish, and they catch really big fish. So to start off with, let's talk about the rods. All right, so before I start talking about the rods, everything that I use here, rods, reels, tackle, line, baits, it's all going to have a link down in the description so you guys can go take a closer look at it. And if you want to buy them, you can buy them. A lot of it's going to be my affiliate link, except for this one right here. This one's not made by, or not sold at Tackle Warehouse. But anyway, all right, so the rods. I really feel like if you're getting into to swim baits, you really need to pick swim baits that you can fish on the rods that you already have. This baby bull shad is perfect for a medium fast action rod, whether it be a spinning rod or a bait caster. A 5-inch, 6-inch bait. I'm not saying go out and buy a bull shad because these are 40, 50, 60 bucks depending on what you get. They're handmade, they're pretty labor intensive, so they cost a lot of money, and the epoxy they use is outrageously expensive. But anyway, go out and look for these 5 and 6-inch swim baits, and you can fish them on a medium heavy rod. If you get anything heavier, like maybe something like, what, 7, 8 ounces, or no, I'm thinking wrong. Over 2 ounces, I would go with a heavy action or a heavy power rod. But what I want you to understand is that there are swim baits out there that you can fish on the rods that you have. Choosing the right line, I think, is really critical. A heavier swim bait fished on braided line really can cause issues. I have a very nice bull shad swim bait that's at the bottom of Lake Gunnersville right now because I fished it on braided line. The reason I say that is that some of these baits are fairly heavy, and when you cast them on braid and you get a backlash halfway through your cast, it causes so much shock to that line that the line snaps. I've done that 3 times over the years. So just know that you need to have a little bit of give in your line, and that's why I recommend using fluorocarbon. Plus, fluorocarbon helps your bait get out a little bit deeper, and it also helps it to swim a little bit better, a little bit more nose down instead of nose up, because braided line floats. So fluorocarbon line. But like with the baby bull shad, I have 12 to 15 pound fluorocarbon. With a 5-inch or 6-inch bull shad, I have 15 to 17, maybe 20 pound fluorocarbon, depending on what's on my jig rod. I'm not really picky about that. But you just kind of want to match it. A heavier line on a baby bull shad will kind of mess up the action a little bit, create more drag, and make it a little bit more difficult to cast. Reel wise, 6-3 to 1, 7-3 to 1. I don't think I would go to an 8-1 to 1, just because I think it allows you just tend to fish it way too fast. But you can fish it on 8-1 to 1 and just slow down. It's no big deal. All right, to start off with, I'm going to show you a couple of different jointed baits, and we're going to talk about jointed baits. This is the Sebile Magic Swimmer. I really think this is one of the originals that really got the craze about throwing swim baits started, or at least jointed swim baits. It really is a great bait. I don't even think they make it anymore. Why? I have no clue. It's still a great catching bait. And this one is the Foreplay from Savage Gear, and it's another really good jointed swim bait, except for this one doesn't, you can't burn it, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but you kind of have to fish it a little bit slower than I normally would, but it's not a bad little bait. It does catch fish. That's a great action, by the way. The other hard baits that I have are all wake baits, and that's something I'm working on this year to gain confidence in, is throwing a wake bait and catching fish on it, so I can make a video eventually on it. So that's a whole nother video. But you know, like the River to Sea S-Waver, this is actually called the Glide Fluke. I don't know who makes it. It's a difficult one to fish. It's got a different little action, a different little thing you got to do with your rod to make it work right. All right, so let's talk about joints and the number of joints. Over the years, we've seen baits that have one joint like the glide bait, 3 joints like the bull shad, and like 500 joints. I don't even know what those are called, but you know, you have the ones that have it's 8 to 10 different little joints on there. And typically they're really cheap. They're made overseas, of course, but they're dirt cheap. And I've never been able to get one of those to swim right. Even when Lucky Craft made that pointer that had the multiple joints in it, that little jerkbait was the worst thing I've ever fished. I stay away from the ones that have a lot of joints on them. This one, the four joint, maybe, or 3 joint, maybe a 4 joint's about as far as I'm gonna go. You just get a better action with a better, you know, wavy action or a better swimming action from it. So if I was beginning, if I just wanted to gain confidence in swim baits, in throwing them and realizing that bass hit them and catching fish, I honestly would buy a baby bull shad. They come in several different colors. I've got a few of them. I got one more right here. But this one right here caught me a really big fish this spring. I think it was like 6 pounds, 6.5 pounds. Giant bass, and I caught it on a spinning rod, which made things really interesting. Light line, so I had to be real careful. But the baby bull shad is one I would start with. It's not super expensive. It's really durable. It sinks well. It's got a good sink, and it really does. It gets bites, and I love it. And I typically don't like little bitty baits, but this one's pretty dynamite. But anyway, I'm gonna get up on the deck of the boat. I'm gonna put the trolling motor down, and then I'm gonna basically just show you how I fish it. There's 2 different techniques, and they're a whole lot of fun, and they do get bites. All right, so to keep this pretty simple, there are 2 basic ways to fish a swim bait: fast or slow. And the best swim baits, you can fish either way very, very well. And that's one of the things, when they designed this little bitty swim bait, Mike made sure that it could be swam really fast. And that's really my favorite way to fish it most of the time. There are times when I really slow down. So let's talk about fishing it fast. First thing you do is you got to realize that you're trying to catch the most aggressive fish out there. You're trying to surprise a big bass and get him to bite. So it's going to be kind of an erratic retrieve. So I'm going to throw it out, and I'm going to keep it just under the surface, and I'm just going to reel and stop, and I'm reeling and stopping. I'm keeping a wake coming up behind that bait. And it's called waking a bait is what it is. But I'm, 3 or 4 turns, 4 or 5 turns, whatever, and I'm just covering water. Got the trolling motor on high, and I'm covering water, trying to get that one fish to come up and bite it as I'm moving along. And then once I get bit, I may slow down a little bit, but it's just a retrieve and stop and try to keep that wake on there and disturb the surface of the water. And you'd be amazed at how many times you can get a big bass to react to a bait that's doing crazy stuff. It's awesome. All right, so the other way I fish it, and I mainly do this offshore when I'm fishing drops and humps and things like that, is I try to fish it slow and get it as close to the bottom as I can without getting snagged. Which reminds me, if you're going to fish with this thing and you're going to fish it slow and low, as I call it, you need to have a good lure retriever. I'll leave a link to the description in the one that I use. But anyway, you've got to have a good lure retriever so you can get it unhung from things. But basically, you just cast it out. And like I said, this one sinks about a foot a second, so I count. For every second, it's 1 foot. So I count down to about a foot shorter than where I think the bottom is. And then I just slowly start reeling. Okay, and this is a 7:3-to-1 gear ratio reel, and I'm slowing down to about half speed. And I'm slowly reeling, and you'd be amazed at how well these baits, most swim baits, can swim slow speeds. And I'll go 5 to 10 turns, and then I'll stop it and let it sink again, because as I'm swimming it towards me, it's rising in the water column, and I want it to come back down. If I'm fishing a bare bottom, then I know that there's nothing to get hung on. I'll let the bait sink all the way down to the bottom until it hits, and swim it back. But right here, I have no clue. I just know that there's sticks somewhere close to the bottom, so I let it sink about 3, 4, 5 feet. I think the bottom's 5 feet, so I'll let it sink to 4, and then I'll just slowly reel it back, real slow. Now, when a fish bites, you don't want to set the hook over your head. You want to set the hook off to the side, about 90 degrees off to the side, and just tighten down on it. Those are treble hooks, they're open hooks. And you just tighten down on it and let the fish fight. If it's a big fish, just take your time. The bigger baits, like the big bull shads, it's a different story. When you got a big fish on, you crank that sucker to the boat as fast as you can. You're fishing a heavy rod with 25-pound line. Crank it as fast as you can, because if that fish jumps, it can gain leverage from those heavier baits. These lighter baits, they have a little bit more difficulty doing it, so you can pretty much take your time with it. All right, so another way to fish, and I don't do this very often, but I have caught a couple of fish over the years doing it, is, I don't know, it's just a crazy way to fish them. But I'll literally pop my rod. Jordan, point down here at the tip of my rod. Okay, I'm literally just popping my rod, and this bait, let me throw the bait out just past Jordan, let him show you what this bait's doing. This is what the bait's doing when I'm popping my rod. And the times that has worked for me, I've been on like a real shallow flat in the fall, and the bait are up there, or the bait's up there, and the bass are up chasing the bait. And I have caught them really well doing that when there's just not a lot of water. And I try to keep it close to the surface. The thing about keeping a bait close to the surface, whether you're reeling it really fast like I showed you earlier or this way, is that bait fish can't go any further than the top of the water. And so a bass loves to pin bait fish up against the top of the water, and that's where he eats them. It's just like let me think. Just like pinning something up against the wall. They can't go any further, so they're coming up and they're eating it right there at the surface. And that's a lot of the reasons why I fish it so close to the surface a lot. But that little crazy action, it doesn't seem like much, but man, they absolutely love it and they crush it. So just a pretty cool little way of fishing it. But that's about it for hard swim baits, guys. It's just one of those things where don't be intimidated. Just grab a couple, 2 or 3 small to medium sized swim baits. Use the rods that you already have, and go out and just fish them for a few days. I literally, in order for me to gain confidence, I took only 2 rods with only swim baits on the boat, and I fished them and fished them and fished them until I felt like I completely understood them enough to be able to catch fish fairly consistent. The bigger baits are a whole different story and a whole different video. They're one of those that you can just, if you throw in big baits, you're not gonna catch a lot. You're gonna catch 1 or 2. Be sure to hit the thumbs up if you like this video. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe. But like I always say, be sure to introduce somebody to fishing. Introduce them to my channel. Let me help you teach them how to fish. More importantly, get out on the water. Go out and catch some fish and have a great day. We'll see you.